Jayden Myles sat frozen in front of the class. Every eye on him, every breath held. His white math teacher had just laughed, tossing the marker like a punchline. "If you solve this, you're smarter than me." 20 seconds later, Jayden's answer shattered the silence. Perfect, undeniable. But instead of applause, the class burst into mocking laughter. And Mr. Bennett, he smiled, then whispered something that would ignite a national scandal. What he said next was caught on tape and leaked. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. Jayden Myles didn't choose to start over. Life forced his hand. When his mother, Kendra, took a new job as a clinical technician across state lines, she called it an opportunity. But Jayden knew it was survival. They'd packed their lives into brown boxes over one weekend, leaving behind the one-bedroom apartment in South Charlotte for the unfamiliar, tightly trimmed lawns of Crestville. A town where smiles felt thin and stares lasted too long. At just 13, Jayden knew how to read a room. His eyes were fast, his ears faster. He knew when silence meant something. And silence was all he got when he stepped into room 28 at Oak Ridge Middle School. The classroom buzzed before he arrived. Whiteboards gleamed. Laptops chirped. Eighth graders whispered in clusters like they'd known each other forever. The moment Jayden walked in, wearing his gray hoodie and jeans, the room didn't go quiet. It went colder. No one said hi. No one scooted over. Desks were full, except the one directly in front of the teacher's podium. That one sat alone, isolated like a bad memory. Mr. Bennett gestured toward it with a sharp nod. No smile. Front and center, Mr. Myles. Jayden hesitated. It wasn't the seat. It was the tone. Dry. Calculated. He could hear it even under the fake politeness. That tone. The one adults use when they've already made up their minds about you. As Jayden took his seat, Mr. Bennett turned to the board. "You're in the advanced track. That means I expect more from you." "No hand-holding here," Jayden nodded. He didn't need hand-holding. He needed air. Mr. Bennett's reputation had preceded him, even in the brief orientation Jayden had endured. He was called old school, which in teacher code often meant unchallenged, untouchable, and unwilling to adapt. His classroom was a shrine to rigidity. No posters, no projects, no joy, just numbers, grades, and silence. Jayden pulled out his notebook, his fingers steady. He'd learned early on that silence could be weaponized, but it could also be armor. The lesson started. Complex equations sprawled across the whiteboard. Mr. Bennett's back was to the class, his voice monotone, but there was precision in every line he drew. Jayden kept up. Math made sense. It was clean. Predictable. Numbers didn't lie, people did. 20 minutes in, Mr. Bennett turned around and eyed the class. "Let's see who's been paying attention." Pop quiz. Groans filled the room, but Mr. Bennett smiled, not warmly, but like he enjoyed their discomfort. Then, his eyes locked onto Jayden. "You, new kid. Let's test you." Jayden straightened in his chair. Mr. Bennett walked over to the board and began scribbling a problem. Not a regular one, but a layered multivariable equation meant to trip up even the best in the class. The chalk moved, with intention. "Let's say you solve this in under a minute," Mr. Bennett said. "That'll mean you're smarter than me." The class chuckled. A few students turned fully around to gawk. Jayden's ears burned, but he stayed focused. He didn't need to prove anything, but he wouldn't let himself be humiliated either. Mr. Bennett stepped back with theatrical flair. "Timer starts now." Jayden scanned the equation. Variables, substitutions, nested fractions, a trick line meant to lead you off course. He blinked once. His pencil scratched the paper. His breathing slowed. 30 seconds. The room hushed. Even the students who had laughed were now watching with quiet tension. Jayden's pencil paused. He glanced up. 20 seconds left, Mr. Bennett said, folding his arms. There was that smirk, faint, almost amused. Jayden erased one digit, rewrote, underlined the answer, then calmly placed the pencil on his desk. Done. It wasn't loud, but it sliced through the silence. The class murmured. Mr. Bennett approached slowly. He picked up Jayden's paper, eyes skimming down the solution. He didn't say anything, but something in his face changed, subtly. A twitch near his mouth, a small crease in his forehead. He looked again. Then again. Jayden didn't flinch. Mr. Bennett finally turned toward the board and replicated Jayden's work. Each step matched, each calculation mirrored. The answer dead on. The smirk was gone. Lucky guess, Mr. Bennet said lightly, placing the paper down. But everyone saw it. Jayden had solved it. Perfectly. In 20 seconds. The bell rang, sharp and shrill. Students bolted. But as Jayden gathered his books, he noticed Mr. Bennet's eyes linger on him a fraction too long. Not impressed, not proud, but calculating. Outside the classroom, Jayden felt his heart race. Not from nerves, but from recognition. He hadn't won anything. He'd started something. At lunch he sat alone. A few students passed by, sneaking glances. A tall boy in a football hoodie whispered, "That's the new kid who made Mr. Bennet sweat." Then laughter. Jayden didn't look up. He knew how quickly amusement could turn to resentment, especially when it came from being too good. By the time the final bell rang that day, Jayden was exhausted. Not from classes, from carrying the weight of expectations and suspicion, from knowing he was being watched, not as a peer, but as a challenge. At home, Kendra was excited. "How was it?" Jayden shrugged. "Fine." She studied him, concern flickering behind her smile. But she didn't press. Jayden went to his room, opened his math textbook, and stared at a new set of problems. They weren't hard, but something in him hesitated. The school hadn't just asked him to be excellent, it had dared him to be invisible, or be punished. He couldn't be both. And deep down, he knew Mr. Bennet wasn't finished. The next morning, Jayden arrives to find his solution from yesterday, rewritten incorrectly on the board, with Mr. Bennet announcing to the class, "Let's talk about common mistakes." Jayden woke up the next morning, feeling the weight of what he couldn't fully explain. It wasn't the math, not the homework waiting in his backpack. It was the memory of Mr. Bennet standing at the board, erasing his accomplishment with a single dismissive breath. He could still hear the man's voice echoing through his mind, lucky guess, as if Jayden hadn't spent years mastering what others assumed he couldn't understand. When he reached school, the hallways buzzed with the typical morning energy. But he sensed the shift almost immediately. A group of students standing near the water fountain paused mid-conversation. As he walked by, they exchanged glances, smirked, and whispered behind cupped hands. Jayden didn't need to hear the words to know he was the center of their joke. He walked into room 208 with careful steps, trying to avoid drawing unnecessary attention, but attention found him anyway. On the board behind Mr. Bennet's desk, written in thick black marker, was the exact equation Jayden had solved the day before, only now it was rewritten incorrectly. "Good morning, class," Mr. Bennet said with a clipped tone. "Before we begin, I want to talk about common mistakes." He tapped the board twice with a dry marker. "This," he said, "is an example of what happens when someone rushes through a problem." Jayden felt the air leave his lungs. He knew exactly what Mr. Bennet was doing. And so did the students. A few nudged each other, stifling laughter. Jayden raised his hand slowly, voice steady. "Sir, that's not how I solved it." Mr. Bennet didn't even look at him. "Of course you wouldn't think so, Mr. Genius." The room erupted in soft chuckles. The nickname stung, not because of the words but because of the venom woven into them. It wasn't praise. It was ridicule. An invitation for the class to see him as an outsider who somehow dared to outperform their long-respected teacher. Jayden's face burned, but he kept his composure. "That's not my work," he repeated, quieter this time. Mr. Bennet finally turned, expression flat. "Then next time, don't rush." There was nothing Jayden could say without making things worse. He lowered his hand, folded his arms, and let the humiliation wash over him like cold rain. When class began, the whispers got louder. Every time Mr. Bennet said "Mr. Genius," the room responded like it was a rehearsed comedy routine. Some students mimicked wiping imaginary tears from their eyes. Others looked Jayden up and down, mocking him with exaggerated nods, as though agreeing with a joke only they understood. At lunch, the isolation deepened. Two boys at a nearby table whispered loudly, "Can you believe he thought he outsmarted Bennet?" "He probably cheated somehow," the other replied, "or made up the answer." Jayden heard every word. He didn't respond. He sat alone again, pushing his food around without appetite. By his third day, the nickname Mr. Genius spread through the hallways. Some used it sarcastically, some with open hostility. A few students just used it to keep themselves entertained. One girl said to her friend, "He walks like he thinks he's somebody." Her friend added, "Advanced math? Please." They probably only put him there because of some diversity rule. Jayden clenched his jaw. He hadn't expected this. He thought excellence would protect him. He hadn't realized it could also paint a target on his back. The real shift happened on a Thursday morning. It started like any other day. Jayden walked into the classroom quietly, sat in his seat, kept his focus forward. But Mr. Bennett was in a mood. Students whispered about it even before the bell rang. His jaw was taut, his grip on the marker firm enough that his knuckles whitened. When he turned toward Jayden, his eyes had an edge that made something inside the boy tighten. Since our resident prodigy thinks he's ready for high-level intellectual competition, Mr. Bennett announced loudly, let's make today interesting. Laughter rippled through the room. Jayden stared ahead. He knew where this was going. I have a challenge for you, Mr. Myles, Mr. Bennett said, stepping toward him. You think you're smart? Let's find out. I never said that, Jayden murmured. You didn't have to. Mr. Bennett turned back to the board, grabbing a fresh marker. He began writing a new problem, one far more advanced than an 8th grade class would normally see. Variables layered over exponents, fractions nested in complex structures, a trick problem disguised as a straightforward equation. The room grew still. Mr. Bennett stepped aside with a theatrical flourish, the kind usually reserved for stage performers. Solve this faster than me, he said. And you're smarter than your teacher. Snickers, whispered Betts. A few students already shaking their heads in disbelief. Jayden felt a knot twist in his stomach. This wasn't a challenge. It was a setup. A public trap designed to humiliate him. But as he stared at the equation, something inside him steadied. He had solved harder problems before. He had spent years studying late at night, pushing through concepts others his age had never seen. Not to impress anyone, simply because numbers made sense when life didn't. Mr. Bennett tapped his watch. Ready? Jayden nodded. Your minute starts now. The class leaned forward like spectators at a circus show. Jayden scanned the problem line by line. His pencil moved quickly, his breathing even. He traced the structure of the equation silently, finding familiar patterns, recognizing hidden shortcuts. Mr. Bennett watched with a smirk, expecting hesitation, confusion, but Jayden didn't hesitate. He found the path through the problem almost instantly. His hand moved with confidence, crossing out variables, simplifying expressions, isolating what needed to be isolated. He worked with a calm precision he didn't even know was visible on his face. 30 seconds passed. Someone whispered, "Wait, is he actually doing it?" Another hissed, "No way." Jayden narrowed his focus, working faster. Every movement felt electric. He wasn't thinking about the room, or the teacher, or the whispers, just the problem, just the logic. 25 seconds. He solved the last step. 20 seconds. Jayden set the pencil down. Hard. The sound cracked through the room. Mr. Bennett's eyes widened, just for a fraction of a second, but the reaction was unmistakable. He had not expected this. Jayden leaned back slightly, heart thudding but face calm. The room went silent. Completely silent. Mr. Bennett swallowed once, stepped forward, and picked up the page. His eyes scanned it, then scanned it again. His expression flickered, a moment of disbelief he tried to hide. But he couldn't hide it quickly enough. A girl in the back whispered, "He got it right. I think he actually got it right." Jayden sat still, his chest rising and falling in controlled breaths. He didn't smile, didn't speak, didn't move. Mr. Bennett cleared his throat and placed the paper down. "Well," he said, voice strained. "Let's review." But his voice didn't carry the confidence it usually did. The smirk was gone, replaced with something much darker. Something that made the hairs on the back of Jayden's neck stand up. Because this wasn't over. It had just begun. Jayden's pencil hits the desk 20 seconds later. Answer complete, correct and chillingly fast. Jayden didn't walk the halls of Oak Ridge anymore. He moved through them like a shadow. The classroom challenge should have been his moment of pride. Instead, it marked the beginning of a slow, quiet war. Not with fists or shouting, but with looks, whispers, and something even more corrosive, doubt. By Monday morning, word had spread far beyond room 28. Students from other classes, some Jayden had never even seen before, pointed at him in the hallways. Not with admiration, with suspicion. There was a weight behind their glances, like they were all thinking the same thing but waiting for someone else to say it. And then someone did. As Jayden stood in the lunch line, a blond boy behind him muttered loud enough for others to hear, "Ain't no way a black kid solved that. He probably looked it up." The words struck like a slap. A few students laughed, not at the joke, but at how bold it was to say out loud. Jayden turned around, locking eyes with the boy. He didn't respond. He didn't have to. The silence said it all, and that silence was growing heavier every day. What hurt more was that none of the teachers said anything. Not even the ones who clearly overheard the comments in the hall. Not the librarian who saw him sitting alone, flinching when someone called him Jayden the calculator. Not the gym coach who chuckled when another student asked if Jayden could solve racism next. But worst of all was Mr. Bennett. He never repeated the nickname Mr. Genius again. But what replaced it was worse. Silence from him now felt like approval, especially when he heard the students' sarcastic comments and did nothing. Sometimes when Jayden answered a question correctly, Bennett would nod without acknowledgement and turn to another student for confirmation, asking, "Do you agree?" as if Jayden's word wasn't enough. In one class, when a student openly mocked Jayden's answer wrongfully, Mr. Bennett chuckled and said, "We all make mistakes, even the gifted ones." Jayden said nothing. But the air inside him thinned. Like each insult didn't stab him, it just squeezed, slowly, methodically, until breathing felt like an effort. At home, he tried to hide it. Kendra would ask how school was, and Jayden would answer with automatic replies. "It's fine, just busy. Math test coming up." But mothers know, especially ones who raised sons in a world that teaches them early how to shrink. One night, as they sat across from each other in the living room, the TV murmuring in the background, Kendra leaned in, eyes narrowed. "You're not eating," she said quietly. Jayden shrugged. "Not hungry. You're not sleeping. I'm tired. You haven't said one thing about your new school since that first day." Jayden looked down at his knees. "It's just school, Mom. It's not a big deal." Kendra sat back. Her voice didn't rise, but her eyes darkened. "Jayden, I need you to be real with me. Are they giving you trouble?" He hesitated. That pause said everything. But still, he shook his head. Good." Kendra didn't press further. She knew what he was doing. The same thing her brothers used to do. The same thing too many black boys do, when they feel the sting of invisible knives and don't want to make their mothers bleed with them. Jayden went upstairs and sat at his desk. His math homework lay untouched. He opened his laptop instead. That's when he saw it. Someone had tagged him in a post on a local student-run meme page, the kind that usually made dumb jokes about lunch food or teacher quirks. But this one was different. The image was a cropped photo of Jayden, taken without his knowledge, probably during lunch, judging by the tray visible in the bottom corner. But it wasn't the photo that made his stomach drop. It was what they did to it. A monkey emoji had been pasted over his face. Above it, the caption read, "Solve this. Why is he even here?" And just beneath the image, a slur, not implied, not hinted, typed outright, raw, unfiltered, hatred in 4 blunt letters. Jayden didn't move. His eyes locked on the screen, unblinking. He reread it. Once, twice, again, hoping maybe it would change. But it didn't. It had likes, comments, laughing emojis. Someone wrote, "Oak Ridge's new math mascot." Another added, "He's better at math than evolution, I guess." His throat dried. His heartbeat slowed. Not fast with panic, slow with shame. And then something worse happened. He heard the notification ping again. Another tag. Another repost. A student from a different school shared it, adding, "This the kid who made Mr. Bennett look stupid? LOL." Jayden sat frozen for a long time. His hands eventually moved on their own. He closed the laptop, slid his chair back, walked to the bathroom. He stood at the sink, staring into the mirror. He didn't recognize his own face. Not because it looked different, but because it no longer felt like his. Like the image on that post had taken something from him and left a ghost behind. Downstairs, Kendra called out, "You need help with anything?" Jayden stared harder into his reflection. "No," he called back. "I'm good." He wasn't. The next day at school, the air felt thicker, more charged. Even though no one mentioned the post out loud, he could feel it vibrating in the smirks, in the whispers that stopped just as he passed. Some of the same students who'd laughed at Mr. Bennett's jokes now looked guilty, not because they were sorry, but because they didn't want to be caught. Others, though, doubled down. A group of boys passed him in the hallway and made monkey noises under their breath. Not loud, not obvious, just enough that Jayden heard them. Just enough to make him feel like the walls were closing in. He reported nothing. What would he say? That someone laughed? That someone smirked? That he saw a post online with a monkey face and a slur? They'd ask for proof, for usernames, for links. And then what? They'd call it a joke. That's what they always called it. That's what Mr. Bennett called it when Jayden finally mustered the nerve to say something. During class, Jayden approached his desk during a group break. His voice was quiet. Sir, someone posted something about me. A photo. It wasn't right. Mr. Bennett didn't even look up from his papers. That sounds like a social media issue, not a school issue. But talk to the office. Not me. Jayden stood there, stunned. Mr. Bennett finally looked up. And Jayden? He paused, pen in hand. Sometimes it's better not to draw attention to yourself. Jayden turned and walked away. It wasn't just silence anymore. It was permission. He didn't go to the office. He didn't tell his mom. He didn't cry. He just walked into the boys' bathroom after class, locked himself in a stall, and sat down, breathing as quietly as he could. The walls felt safer than the people outside them. And then his phone vibrated again. New notification. Another tag. This time the caption said, Mr. Genius back at it. But the photo wasn't just another edit. It was a screenshot of his middle school records, posted anonymously, and next to it in bold red text bet he couldn't pass if they didn't lower the bar for him. Jayden stares at the leaked school records, proof someone inside the school is helping tear him down. Kendra didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at Jayden's closed bedroom door, like it was the last thing standing between her son and a world that wanted to swallow him whole. She hadn't seen the photo yet. Not the monkey emoji. Not the slur, but she had seen something worse. The slow disintegration of her son's life. It wasn't just the silence anymore. It was the way his shoulders curled inward. The way he stopped looking her in the eye. The way he carried his backpack like it was too heavy, even though she knew it wasn't the books weighing him down. At 5:42 a.m., she made a decision. By 7:10 she was dressed, her car keys in hand, her jaw locked. At 7:45 she was in the front office of Oak Ridge Middle School. A secretary looked up, startled. Can I help? I need to speak to Principal Dalton, Kendra said, calm but clipped. Do you have an appointment? He'll want to make time. It's about a staff member harassing my son. That got her a pause. The secretary stood, disappeared into a back office, and returned moments later with a tight smile. He can see you now. Kendra entered Principal Dalton's office with steel in her spine. The man behind the desk, salt and pepper hair, round glasses, a soft navy tie, stood up and extended a hand. She didn't take it. He cleared his throat, gesturing to a chair. Please, sit. Kendra sat, but only because she needed the leverage of calm. I assume this is about Jayden, Dalton began, his tone already carrying the condescension of someone used to calming angry parents down. Yes, she said, folding her hands tightly. And it's about Mr. Bennett. I want to know what you're going to do about him. Dalton leaned back, surprised by the directness. I'm not sure I follow. You're telling me you haven't seen what's going on? You haven't heard the slurs being whispered in your hallways? The photos online? The fact that my son, who has done nothing but succeed, is being harassed by students and your staff. Dalton adjusted his glasses. We're aware of some online chatter. Chatter? Kendra repeated. That's what you're calling a hate-filled post with a monkey emoji and a racial slur. He winced slightly. Look, I understand your concern, but social media is difficult to police. It didn't originate on our network. But it's your students, it's your environment. And it's your teacher, Mr. Bennett, who is encouraging it. You think I don't see what's happening? You think I don't recognize a microaggression when I hear it dressed up as a math problem? Dalton clasped his hands. Mr. Bennett is a respected educator. He's been with this school for 17 years. He's mentored thousands of students. White students, Kendra cut in sharply. Let's be honest here. My son walks into his class, outperforms him once, and suddenly he's mocked, isolated, accused of cheating, and you say nothing? Dalton's voice lowered. I'm asking you to calm down. Kendra stood. No, she said quietly. I will not calm down. I will not sit here and watch my son be torn apart in silence just because it makes you uncomfortable to deal with one of your beloved staff members. Dalton's mask slipped for a moment. His jaw clenched. We are conducting an internal review. Kendra stepped closer to the desk. Let me explain something to you, Principal Dalton. My grandfather marched in Selma. He had dogs unleashed on him so I could sit here today and demand better for my child. I won't let this school, or any school, push my son back into a corner he doesn't belong in. He is brilliant, he is kind, and he is not your scapegoat. Dalton didn't respond. The silence stretched thick. Kendra exhaled, then added, "You have until the end of the week to take action. If you don't, I will." She turned, walked out without another word, and left the door swinging behind her. That night, Jayden came home to find his mother at the kitchen table with a notepad full of dates, names, and screenshots. She didn't tell him everything. Not yet. But he saw the storm in her eyes. "What's all that?" he asked cautiously. "Notes," she said. "I talked to the school." Jayden's face dropped. "Mom, you don't have to worry. I said what needed to be said." He hesitated, lowering his backpack. "That's not how it works there." Kendra turned to him. "Then we'll change how it works." Jayden didn't answer. He just sat down beside her, slowly, quietly, and started writing too. For a moment, they worked in sync, mother and son, paper and ink, building a case not just for justice, but for survival. But justice wasn't on Oak Ridge's agenda. 2 days later, a letter came home in Jayden's backpack, sealed in a plain envelope, unsigned, stamped with the school district's emblem. Kendra opened it with cautious hands, her eyes scanning quickly. Then they stopped. She read it again and again. "What is it?" Jayden asked. She didn't answer right away. Her lips parted, but the words wouldn't come. Jayden took the paper from her hands and read the headline himself. "Notice of academic reassignment. Advanced math placement revoked effective immediately." Jayden stared, stunned. The letter gave no reason. No grades listed. No performance issues. Just cold administrative language stating that he would be reassigned to a standard-level mathematics course starting the following Monday. Kendra stood up so fast, her chair tipped backward. "This is retaliation," she whispered. "They're punishing you for being smarter than him." Jayden's throat tightened. "Can they even do that?" "They just did." She picked up her phone. "We're not staying quiet anymore. Jayden is removed from the honors program with no explanation." The morning Jayden walked into his new math class, the temperature in the air felt different. Not colder, duller. Gone were the sharp glances, the snickers when he raised his hand. Gone were the competitive stares from other honor students trying to beat him to the answer. In this room, no one paid him attention. Not because they accepted him, but because they didn't expect anything from him. The lower-tier math classroom smelled faintly of dust and aging textbooks. The walls were bare, save for a faded poster that read, "Mistakes are proof that you are trying." Jayden stared at it for a long time, wondering if that same rule applied when your only mistake was being smarter than your teacher. He sat in the back, slouched low, trying to shrink inside himself. The teacher, a wiry woman, with a tired smile named Mrs. Leonard, passed out worksheets without looking up. Jayden glanced at the first page. It was basic. Too basic. He had mastered this content 2 years ago. And yet, here he was, reassigned, stripped of his honors label, with no hearing, no chance to defend himself. Just a decision made in silence, and delivered like a punishment. A verdict passed in the shadows. And then the real wound came. That afternoon, as he waited outside the counselor's office to discuss his schedule, he overheard it, 2 teachers passing by in hushed tones, not noticing him tucked behind the office wall. Heard Bennett caught him cheating. Plagiarized a whole solution online. Apparently. Really? I thought he was supposed to be some prodigy. Yeah, well, prodigies don't need Google. They laughed. Quiet, complicit. Jayden closed his eyes, willing himself not to move, not to break, not to scream. He hadn't cheated. Not once. Not ever. That accusation, that single sharp lie, spread like wildfire. And in a town like Crestville, where image mattered more than truth, it was enough to rewrite his whole narrative. That evening, Kendra stormed into the house with a folded packet in her hand. "They gave me this," she said, slamming it onto the kitchen table. Jayden looked up from his textbook. "What is it?"
"Your academic file. Your revised record. It says you were removed from honors based on academic integrity concerns."
She paused, eyes darkening. "There's no report, no evidence, no meeting. Nothing." Jayden blinked slowly. "So they're calling me a cheater?" "No," Kendra said bitterly. "They're branding you as one." Jayden looked away. The word echoed louder than any insult he'd heard in the hallways. She paced the floor. "I asked who filed the report. They refused to tell me. Said it came through internal channels. You know what that means?"
"Bennett," Jayden whispered.
Exactly. It made sense. Too much sense. After the public challenge. After the humiliation in front of the class. After the silence. This wasn't just retaliation, it was sabotage. Kendra didn't sleep that night either. Instead, she sat in the dark living room, phone in hand, digging emails, online forums, teacher directories, district policy manuals, anything she could find. She contacted the district office, left voicemails, emailed the superintendent. No one replied. And then on the third night, something unexpected happened. Kendra's phone buzzed just after 1. The sender was anonymous. The message short. "You need to see this." Attached a PDF file labeled Faculty Group Chat Transcript. Oak Ridge. Her stomach dropped. She opened it. At first it was mundane. Casual banter between teachers. Jokes about grading. Students asking for extensions. But then she saw it. A name. Bennett. Our little genius got quiet. Must have finally realized he doesn't belong. Another teacher. "I thought diversity hires only applied to staff, not students." Bennett again. "If I wanted to teach remedial algebra, I'd switch districts." The messages kept coming. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Some were vague. Others were unmistakable. Bennett, "Kids got attitude. Probably raised on excuses, not discipline." Another teacher. "They always play the race card when things don't go their way." Kendra's hands shook as she scrolled. The group chat was full of them. Coded language, passive-aggressive jokes, thinly veiled racism masquerading as staff banter. And not just from Bennett. Other teachers, coworkers, leaders. She reached the bottom of the file, and there it was. Let's see how smart he feels in standard math. Maybe he'll learn to stay in his lane." That line broke her. Her jaw tightened. Her fingers curled. A fire lit in her chest that felt ancestral. The same fire her father carried through marches and arrests. The same fire her grandmother carried when she desegregated her high school in 19. She stood up, heart racing, and marched to Jayden's room. He was still awake, headphones in, staring blankly at his tablet. She held the phone out without a word. Jayden read silently. Every line, every message, each one sank deeper. When he looked up, his face was unreadable, but his eyes glistened. "I knew it," he whispered. "I knew they didn't just hate me for being smart. They hated that I proved it." Kendra took a breath, steadying her voice.
"This is war," she said.
Jayden didn't flinch. "Then let's fight." Jayden's mother finds a private group chat between faculty members, filled with coded racist language. The screenshots were never meant to see daylight. But once they did, there was no putting the fire out. It started with a single post on a small Twitter account called Educators Exposed, a profile that usually posted anonymous tips about abusive behavior in school systems across the country. Just before dawn, they uploaded a thread titled "Oak Ridge Middle School, Crestville, NC, Racism in Plain Sight," and under it, image after image from the group chat, the worst messages highlighted in red, timestamps intact, names unblurred. Mr. Bennett's were frequent, but he wasn't alone. By noon, the thread had over 10,000 shares. By 4 p.m., the hashtag Justice for Jayden was trending nationwide. And by the next morning, the story had breached every platform. TikToks narrated the messages over sad piano music. Instagram infographics summarized what happened, each slide ending with a call to action. Facebook comment sections boiled with rage, sympathy, denial, and deflection. Black parents from across the country shared their own stories in solidarity, while some white parents at Oak Ridge claimed the leak was taken out of context. Jayden was in his room, staring at the screen, stunned to silent by the scale of it. His face pulled from an old-school newsletter, had already been used in 3 viral posts. One labeled him a genius, another a victim. A third one called him a liar in bold white font. Kendra paced the kitchen, phone ringing every 15 minutes. Reporters, bloggers, advocates, opportunists. Everyone wanted a quote, a soundbite, a statement, but she hadn't spoken to a single one yet. She wasn't afraid. She was furious. Still, she kept the curtains drawn. Because with every show of support came the backlash. One post read, "This is why kids can't take criticism anymore. Everything's racism now." Another, "Maybe he just wasn't that smart to begin with." And then the emails started arriving, directly to Kendra's inbox. "Your son's not a genius. He's a spoiled brat. Bennett's the real victim. Hope you're proud of destroying a good man." Jayden read one by accident. It sat open on the screen when he came to the kitchen. He stared at it. Quiet. Frozen. "People really think this?" he asked. Kendra didn't answer. She just closed the laptop. But the damage was already done. It was a strange kind of pain, being believed by strangers, only to be hated by others, just as loudly. Jayden hadn't asked to become a symbol. He just wanted to solve math problems and go home. Now he was a headline. At school, everything shifted. The students who once mocked him now avoided him, not out of shame, out of fear of association. The school staff walked on eggshells. The hallway walls felt like glass, fragile and watching. Principal Dalton released a bland statement on the school's website, calling the leak deeply concerning and under investigation. Mr. Bennett was placed on administrative leave, but not suspended, not fired, just moved, quietly. When a local news truck showed up outside Oak Ridge, the principal called it an unfortunate distraction. Jayden didn't return to class that week. His mother refused. Instead, they stayed home, surrounded by boxes of documents, folders of emails, printed screenshots, and voice memos. Kendra built a war room on the dining table, but in the center of it all was Jayden, 13 years old, overwhelmed and shrinking again. He stopped sleeping. His nights stretched into silence. He'd sit awake, refreshing feeds, watching the narrative twist and turn, helpless to steer it. One night he scrolled too far into the comments. He found a thread accusing him of staging the whole thing. Bet the mom faked those messages. That kid's just trying to get a scholarship. Typical race-baiting tactics. He shut the laptop, walked to the bathroom and threw up. Kendra heard him. She waited by the door. You okay? He wiped his mouth, voice barely a whisper. I didn't ask for this. I know. I just wanted to be good at something. You still are. He shook his head. Doesn't matter. And that broke her more than anything else had. The next day, Kendra finally agreed to speak out, not to reporters, to someone who would listen first. She contacted a local civil rights lawyer, who connected her with an advocacy group. Together they planned a press conference. A controlled message. Facts, not emotions. Evidence, not rumors. They wanted to regain control of the story. But as they prepared their statement, another bomb dropped. Mr. Bennett, silent until now, agreed to a TV interview. With Crestville's most watched evening anchor, Heather Malloy. The announcement came with a teaser. Respected educator speaks out against online smear campaign. Kendra stared at the headline. He's going to lie again. Jayden's hands trembled. He's going to say I made it all up. That night the town tuned in. The interview opened with soft music. Mr. Bennett sat in a clean gray suit, glasses polished, expression calm. He looked nothing like the man who laughed in the group chat messages. He looked like every parent's favorite teacher, the one who taught your older cousin AP calculus and helped him get into Duke. Heather leaned forward.
Mr. Bennett, thank you for joining us. The nation is watching. What do you have to say?
Mr. Bennett folded his hands. I've dedicated my life to teaching. I've worked with students of all backgrounds. I've never once let race affect my judgment, and I stand by my record. Heather nodded. What about the leaked messages? I've reviewed them. I don't condone some of the language, but they were taken out of context. Those chats were informal, private conversations among colleagues. None of it impacted my teaching. And Jayden? He paused, took a breath. I believe Jayden is a bright young man, but sometimes students struggle with pressure. When mistakes happen, they look for someone to blame. In this case, that someone was me. Jayden watched the screen, his chest tightening with every word. Kendra turned the TV off. They're going to believe him, Jayden whispered. Kendra didn't answer right away. Then she looked him in the eyes. Then we'll give them something they can't ignore. Mr. Bennett agrees to a TV interview and doubles down on everything. After Mr. Bennett's televised performance, Oak Ridge didn't just react, it fractured. The streets felt tighter, sidewalks colder, school walls more hostile. The community split clean down the middle, those who stood with Jayden, and those who claimed he was part of a witch hunt against a good man. Yard signs started to appear like battle flags. Some read, "Justice for Jayden," in bold black letters. Others hung just as high, read, "I stand with Mr. Bennett." Neighbors who once waved at each other from across fences now crossed the street in silence. At the grocery store, Kendra felt it too. She reached for a loaf of bread and noticed a woman beside her suddenly turned the other way. At checkout, the clerk glanced at her and said with forced cheer, "You're the mom, right? The boy from TV?" Kendra's jaw tensed. "My name's Kendra." The woman gave a tight smile. "Well, people say a lot of things. Who really knows, right?" Kendra left the store with her heart pounding. Not from fear, from exhaustion. Jayden, meanwhile, was fading. Each morning he woke up later, even though he barely slept. Each night he stayed in his room longer, even though he no longer played games or read. He just sat, quiet, hollowed out. He stopped eating full meals. His plate would return to the sink half-touched, if at all. His face began to lose its softness, cheeks more drawn, eyes dulled by shadows. Kendra tried everything. Want to go for a walk? No. Let's watch something together. I'm fine. But he wasn't. He barely looked at her, not because he was angry, because he couldn't bear to let her see how lost he was. One night she walked by his room and saw him sitting on the floor, legs pulled to his chest, headphones in, rocking slightly. She paused. Listened. He wasn't playing music. Just white noise. Static. That's when she called Dr. Graham. The therapist arrived 2 days later, sitting across from Jayden in their living room, a quiet notepad in her lap. Jayden stared at the floor. Jayden, she said softly, do you know what depression feels like? He shrugged. Sometimes it's not sadness, she continued. It's nothingness, numbness, like everything's muted, even your own thoughts. Jayden blinked slowly. Then maybe I've been depressed since the first day of school. Kendra had to leave the room. Later, Dr. Graham pulled her aside. He's showing signs of early onset depression, she said gently. Withdrawn behavior, food aversion, emotional flatness. And unfortunately, it's not just situational anymore. It's starting to take root. Kendra nodded, barely holding her composure. What can I do? Keep him safe. Keep him talking. And Kendra, if this continues to escalate, if the school doesn't act soon, we may need to remove him entirely. Remove him. The thought haunted her. Jayden had worked too hard, fought too much. He deserved to be there. And yet every day he remained in that town. In that system, it chipped away at him. The next blow came from the school board. In a public meeting streamed online, the superintendent called the incident unfortunate, but insisted that due process must be respected for all parties. Jayden watched it with Kendra from the couch. They're going to keep him, he said flatly. Kendra said nothing. Then, a parent took the mic. I've known Mr. Bennett for years. The man said, this isn't about race, it's about discipline. That boy needed to learn his place. The room didn't erupt, it applauded. Jayden stood up and walked out without a word. The next morning, a protest formed outside Oak Ridge. Students, parents, former alumni, some holding signs, others shouting chants. Protect black students and end academic racism. But across the street, another crowd gathered. Support our teachers. Bennett, integrity. It wasn't just a protest anymore, it was a war zone of beliefs, with Jayden in the crossfire. Cameras circled, microphones waved. Police officers monitored both sides, arms crossed, lips tight. Jayden watched it all unfold on his phone, seated on his bedroom floor. They're not fighting for me, he muttered. They're fighting about me. That distinction mattered, because being a symbol meant you stopped being a person. Every day, new articles appeared, think pieces, interviews, debates on morning radio. Conservative pundits labeled Jayden a soft example of cancel culture. Progressive bloggers hailed him a child caught in the machine of white supremacy. But no one asked how he was sleeping, or eating, or breathing. Not until the email arrived. It was sent anonymously. No subject line, no body text, just a single file attachment titled, Bennett Classroom Record, 0927. Kendra clicked it. It was audio, scratchy but clear enough. She listened once, then again, and again. Jayden walked in to find her frozen, hand over her mouth. What is it? She didn't answer right away, just held the phone out. Jayden put the earbuds in. He hit play. The recording started mid-lesson. Mr. Bennett was speaking. Think they're all special now. Every time a kid with a sob story gets a good grade, the world acts like he's Einstein. Then laughter, soft but audible. Another voice. A fellow teacher. At least Einstein didn't play the race card. More laughter. Mr. Bennett again. Quieter, closer to the mic. You know what I told the principal? I said, one more headline, and we're gonna have the NAACP crawling through the school, like termites. Jayden stopped the audio. His hands trembled, not from shock, but from confirmation. I knew he was saying stuff like this, he whispered. But this is proof. Kendra sat beside him. This wasn't leaked. Someone sent this to us directly. Jayden turned slowly. Then someone inside that school is finally on our side. A hidden recording from the math classroom is discovered, and what Mr. Bennett said is worse than imagined. The audio file didn't just confirm their fears, it detonated them. Within hours of hearing it, Kendra contacted her attorney. She sent the recording to the advocacy group representing them, and to a trusted journalist who had been following Jayden's case quietly for weeks. "Let me verify it," the reporter had said. "But if it's real, it's not just a story, it's a scandal." It didn't take long. By the next evening, the full transcript of the recording had been published in the Crestville Journal, under the headline, "Leaked Audio Reveals Oak Ridge Teacher Mocked Black Student in Class. Statistical Outliers with Entitlement." The article included verified timestamps, names, and direct quotes. Jayden sat at the kitchen table, eyes locked on the screen. The words glared back at him in bold, unflinching type. "They're not gifted. They're just good at mimicking patterns. You give them one hard question they've never seen, and they fold. That's why I call them statistical outliers, not geniuses." That was Mr. Bennett, recorded. Undeniable. Another quote followed. "He's just another kid looking for special treatment, because he's black. If I had $1 for every time I've seen this play out, I could retire." Laughter. From another teacher. Jayden's throat tightened. He had expected cruelty, but this level of arrogance, spoken so casually, ripped deeper than any meme, rumor, or silent stare. It was calculated. A belief system. He wasn't dealing with one racist teacher. He was dealing with an entire culture that protected him. The tape went viral within hours. Local news stations looped it in segments. National outlets picked it up overnight. Protesters returned to Oak Ridge's front gates with megaphones and banners, louder and more furious than ever. No more silence. Bennett must go. Jayden's name returned to trending status, this time not just online, in real life, plastered across signs, pinned to jackets, painted on posters. But as his name got louder, so did the resistance. A group of Oak Ridge parents held a Support Our Teachers rally in the school parking lot. Some claimed the tape was doctored. Others blamed cancel culture and called for an end to this witch hunt against our educators. One woman, interviewed by a local channel, sneered into the mic. "This is what happens when we let outsiders change how we teach." Bennett was just being honest. Jayden watched the clip in silence. "I'm not a person to them," he finally said. "You are to me," Kendra whispered, "and to anyone who matters." But it was hard to feel that. The tape, despite its clarity, did not bring immediate justice. The school board released a cold, tightly worded statement. "We are aware of the alleged recording and are investigating thoroughly. We urge the public to allow due process to unfold. No apology, no suspension, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing." Instead, they asked for patience. Kendra called a press conference on the front lawn of Oak Ridge Middle the next morning. Surrounded by reporters, activists, and supporters, she stepped up to the microphone, holding the printed transcript in her hand like a weapon. "My son has been mocked, targeted, accused, reassigned, and now, we have proof of the hate he's endured. Still, this school district chooses silence, while we choose truth." Cheers erupted behind her. Jayden stood nearby, next to his attorney, his face unreadable but his eyes sharp, focused. The story picked up national steam. Cable news anchors debated it live. One anchor pointed out that Bennett was still technically employed, drawing a paycheck shielded by tenure. Another guest, a former teacher, responded, "This is exactly what black families mean when they say the system isn't broken. It was built this way." That line echoed everywhere. And still the school board stalled. Inside Oak Ridge, tensions snapped like brittle glass. Students whispered through halls like it was a haunted house. Teachers clammed up. Faculty meetings were closed door, and extra security was posted at entrances. Even the staff who wanted to support Jayden stayed quiet, afraid of retaliation, their own jobs hanging by a thread. Then something unthinkable happened. 2 days after the tape's release, Jayden was called to the office during homeroom. He expected another media request, maybe a meeting with the counselor, but when he entered the principal's office, Principal Dalton was already standing, a printed form in his hand. Kendra was there too, seated stiffly, her hands clenched around her purse. "Jayden," Dalton said, not meeting his eyes, "this is a notice of temporary suspension." The room froze. Kendra stood slowly. "You're suspending him." Dalton cleared his throat. "We've had several parent complaints. The environment has become disruptive. There have been threats. Vandalism. A teacher was followed to their car. We're placing Jayden on home suspension for his safety. For his safety? Kendra echoed, her voice rising. You didn't suspend the teacher who called him a statistical outlier. But now you're removing my son. Dalton didn't flinch. We are prioritizing a peaceful learning environment for all students. Jayden didn't speak. He couldn't. His heart pounded so hard it made his vision pulse. Kendra grabbed her bag. You'll be hearing from our lawyer. She took Jayden's hand and walked him out of the building, without another word. Outside, the protesters were still shouting, but Jayden couldn't hear them. Inside, he felt something snap. He wasn't safe in school. He wasn't safe online. He wasn't even safe when the truth was on tape. That night, he sat in his room, phone off, blinds drawn, the world spinning around him like a storm he couldn't stop. His body was still, his face unreadable, but his mind was racing. Somewhere deep inside him, beyond the pain, beyond the betrayal, a fire had started to burn. Because if the truth wasn't enough to bring change, maybe it was time to become something more than a symbol. Jayden is suspended for disruption, citing safety concerns. Jayden sat motionless on the edge of his bed, still wearing the same clothes from the day before. His backpack lay untouched in the corner, half-sipped, like it had given up on being useful. His suspension wasn't a punishment, it was an eviction. And outside, the world refused to stay quiet. By the end of the week, national organizations were now involved. One flyer circulated across town like wildfire. March for Jayden. No more silence. No more shame. It featured his face, a candid photo from his old school's science fair, smiling beside a homemade math model. But in this context, that smile felt eerie, out of place. Kendra held the flyer tightly. This protest, it's not just about you anymore, she told Jayden. It's about every kid like you who was told to sit down when they stood out. Jayden didn't answer, but she saw it in his eyes, something awakening. Not anger, not fear, resolve. That Saturday, hundreds gathered in front of Oak Ridge Middle. Parents, activists, alumni, past students who had once sat in Mr. Bennett's classroom and carried their own scars, now stepping forward with memories that could no longer be silenced. Kendra stood near the front, megaphone in hand, with Jayden's attorney and two representatives from a national civil rights group at her side. She looked across the crowd. Some held signs. My child deserves better. Silence is complicity. Jayden could be your son. But what struck her most were the children. Black students from surrounding schools holding posters that read, I am not an outlier. Gifted male, guilty. She gripped the megaphone tighter and stepped onto the makeshift platform. My son is not a disruption. He is not a threat. He is not a political issue. He is a child. A brilliant, quiet, determined child. And this school tried to erase him. Cheers roared through the crowd. I watched him be mocked, accused, and removed. Not because he failed, but because he succeeded too well for their comfort. And when we brought the truth into the light, they tried to dim it with fear. More voices joined her. One by one, former Oak Ridge students took turns on the mic, recounting their experiences, being discouraged from applying to advanced classes, being told they were too distracted to keep up, being punished for raising their hands too often. Then came Kendra again, standing taller this time. I am not asking for pity. I am demanding accountability. But just as her words lifted the crowd, sirens interrupted them. 6 police cruisers pulled up along the road, bordering the school. From them stepped a team of officers, not the usual local patrol. These were in riot gear, helmets, batons, bulletproof vests. Their arrival sent a shudder through the atmosphere like a warning shot fired without sound. Kendra saw it immediately. The tension, the shift. Some protesters moved back, some froze. One officer raised a bullhorn. This is now an unlawful assembly. You are blocking public access to school property. But it's Saturday, someone shouted. The officer continued, unfazed. You have 10 minutes to disperse, or force will be used. Kendra turned to the organizers. What do we do? We stay calm, the attorney whispered. They want a reaction. But emotions had already boiled over. A mother in the crowd shouted, my baby was suspended too. Someone else yelled, how many more kids have to get hurt before y'all care? The line between protest and panic thinned fast. Jayden wasn't there. He was at home, watching it all live on a live stream. Someone posted on Instagram. The frame shook. pixelated, but he could make out his mother's voice, her face, her courage. He watched her raise her arm as if shielding herself, not from the sun, but from the weight of a system crashing down. Back at the protest, the tension snapped. One protester, no one could say who, threw a water bottle toward the police line. It didn't hit anyone, but it was enough. The officers surged forward, shoving, yelling. Banners ripped. People stumbled over one another trying to get back. Kendra grabbed the arm of a girl, tripping on the curb, and pulled her upright. Around her, screaming erupted. Some from fear, others from fury. Jayden watched the camera angle jolt wildly. The image blacked out for a second, then returned, showing flashing lights, officers shouting commands. Then came the sound. Pop! A flashbang. Smoke blurred the view. Jayden's heart pounded as he fumbled to refresh the feed. His hands shook uncontrollably. "Mom," he whispered. He ran downstairs, panic rising like floodwater. The screen on their living room TV now showed a local news channel. Protest at Oak Ridge Middle School turns chaotic after police intervene. Reports of injuries and arrests are developing. Kendra's face appeared briefly on screen. Mid-shout, surrounded by flashing lights. Jayden collapsed onto the couch, paralyzed. 20 minutes later, the front door swung open. It was her, disheveled, eyes glassy, shirt dirt-streaked, but standing. He rushed to her, arms wrapping tightly around her waist. "I saw everything," he choked. "I'm okay," she whispered into his hair. "I'm okay," but she wasn't, and neither was he. They sat on the floor for a long time. No words, just breathing. Later that night, the house was quiet. Jayden finally fell asleep on the couch, his head in Kendra's lap. The TV was still on mute, flickering light across the walls. Then, a sound, glass, shattering. Kendra gasped, jerking up. Jayden bolted upright, their living room window broken. A brick lay on the floor, surrounded by shards, on it crudely painted in red. "Liars, get out." Jayden stared at the brick, his body frozen, his heart racing. For the first time since it all began, Kendra picked up the phone and called 911, not for protest, not for protection, but because their home, their last piece of safety, had just been invaded. Someone throws a brick through the family's living room window that night. The brick hadn't just broken glass, it had shattered something sacred. That night, Kendra barely slept. She sat at the kitchen table, glancing between the front window, now covered with plywood, and the glowing screen of her laptop. Jayden was upstairs, silent again. But this time the silence wasn't withdrawal. It was waiting, watching, listening. Kendra stared at the civil rights complaint form for hours before she clicked submit. The lawsuit was filed the next morning. Jayden Myles v. Oak Ridge School District. The claim: systemic discrimination, retaliation, emotional distress, academic sabotage, and failure to protect a black student. It made headlines within hours, and it didn't take long before the media came pounding. News vans lined the curb like vultures. Reporters with wide smiles and hungry eyes knocked on the door. Just one quote: "Kendra, how's Jayden holding up? Do you feel safe in your home?" She turned them all away, until one woman came with a different tone. Her name was Rachel Torres, a producer for a national network. "I'm not here to sensationalize," she said, gently. "I'm here to listen. We want to do a segment on Jayden's story, not just the scandal, the boy behind it." Kendra hesitated. Then she looked upstairs. Jayden hadn't eaten much in days. He hadn't smiled in weeks. But maybe, if the world saw the real boy behind the headlines, something would shift. She agreed. 2 days later, a camera crew arrived. The house was staged quietly. No makeup teams, no lights too bright. Just Jayden, seated on the couch, wearing a gray hoodie and quiet eyes. Rachel sat across from him, recorder in hand. "You don't have to perform," she said softly. "Just tell me what you felt. Not what they said, what you felt." Jayden looked at her, then down, then back up. "I felt like I stopped being me," he whispered. "Like they turned me into a headline, or a threat or a problem." He paused, breathing slowly. "I just wanted to solve math problems. But they turned that into something wrong." The segment aired 3 nights later. It was raw, honest. A 13-year-old boy, explaining racism not from books, but from wounds. Clips from the leaked recording played beside shots of him explaining how he used to get excited about equations, how he no longer touched his textbooks. It aired nationally, and it broke hearts. The hashtag #NaiSeeJayden trended by morning. Celebrities shared it. Public figures, Even professors from Ivy League schools posted videos praising his resilience and brilliance. But not everyone clapped. In Crestville, more houses added new yard signs. "We support our teachers." An anonymous parent group circulated flyers titled, "Stop the Media Circus. Protect our community's reputation." Then the real gut punch came. 3 weeks after Kendra filed the lawsuit, she received a certified envelope at her door. Inside, a legal notice. Defendant Miss Donald Bennett hereby files suit against Jayden Myles and Kendra Myles for defamation of character, false allegations, and reputational harm. Jayden read it over her shoulder. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Kendra sank into the nearest chair. "Defamation," she whispered. "He's suing us." The attached paperwork confirmed it. Bennett's suit demanded $250,000 in damages. He claimed the audio was edited, the accusations were exaggerated, and that he had been unlawfully attacked in public discourse. Worse still, he wasn't alone. The documents revealed his legal backing, a far-right, aggressively litigious organization known for defending public employees accused of racism, often turning them into political martyrs. Jayden sat on the couch stunned. "So, he destroys my name, my grades, my safety, and now we're the ones on trial." Kendra's voice trembled with fury. "This is what they do when the truth doesn't break you. They flip the story and make you the villain." Their attorney confirmed it later. "They're trying to scare you into silence. This is not about winning the case. It's about exhausting you. Legally, emotionally, financially." Jayden stood, fists clenched, but not in rage, in disbelief. "Will we lose?" he asked quietly. Kendra looked at him. "We haven't lost yet. We're still standing." The media storm intensified. Some networks painted Bennett as a fallen teacher, betrayed by political agendas. Others framed Jayden's story as part of a larger cultural reckoning in American education. Jayden couldn't walk through his own neighborhood without being recognized, and not always with kindness. One morning, as he and Kendra stepped out to check the mail, a man in a pickup truck drove by slowly and shouted, "Should have stayed in your lane, boy." Jayden didn't even flinch. Kendra grabbed his hand, but he pulled away gently. "I'm okay," he said, even if it wasn't entirely true. The legal calendar filled fast. Depositions, paperwork, interviews. Every part of their story was dissected. Emails, grades, footage, class schedules. Jayden was only 13, but the questions they asked him made him feel 30. "Did you ever feel resentment toward Mr. Bennett? Were you trying to provoke attention with your speed solving? Do you think your race was the only reason for your treatment?" Even the way they phrased things hurt. Only reason. As if racism needs co-pilots to be believable. Jayden answered each question with a quiet dignity that made even the court stenographer glance up once, her eyes softening, but the weight was real. One night as he lay in bed, he whispered through the dark, "I miss when life was just school and numbers." Kendra sat on the floor beside him, resting her head on the edge of his mattress. "I know, baby. No one's gonna remember I was good at math," he said. "They're just gonna remember I was in a fight." Kendra looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then let's make sure they remember who started it." Mr. Bennett countersues for defamation, backed by a far-right legal group. When the news of the audio tape spread, many inside the community acted surprised. But for one quiet voice in the shadows, a former teacher at Oak Ridge Middle, the leaks were simply overdue. It began with an anonymous tip to the lawyer, representing Jayden and Kendra. A tip that delivered a faded personnel file, stamped confidential, created 15 years ago. The file was thin, but the implications were heavy. As the lawyer forwarded it to Kendra, she stared at her phone screen long after midnight, the glow harsh against the darkness in the living room. The title read, "Oak Ridge Disc Dissing Records, 2009, Teacher Donald Bennett." Jayden stood behind her, tall but trembling. The legal papers, the media, the brick through their window, the protest chaos. It was all too much. But this was different. This went deep. The file described complaints from a black student who had been in Mr. Bennett's class years ago. Someone named Marcus Hayes. According to the records, Marcus challenged a math grade after claiming Bennett had marked him down unfairly. The complaint alleged Bennett had used racial slurs when responding, called Marcus slow, lazy, and accused him of not being cut out for advanced work. The file noted, there was insufficient evidence, and the complaint was dismissed. But what stood out was a note in red ink. Teacher warned, no further action, tenure retained. Kendra exhaled, shallow and furious. "They knew," she whispered. "They knew and they covered for him." Jayden's eyes darkened. "Then nothing's new. He's been hiding behind this school for years. That same morning, their attorney called. We might have grounds to expand the lawsuit, show a pattern, racial bias, retaliation, and a cover-up. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Word leaked quickly. Local reporters picked up the personnel file, verifying its authenticity with Oak Ridge staff directories. Soon, the narrative changed. This wasn't just about a black boy's math grade. It was about institutional betrayal, about how a respected teacher had walked free decades while truth was buried in yellowing paper. In the weeks that followed, former students began contacting the Myles family. Some remained anonymous, scared to be named. Others, braver perhaps, reached out directly, sharing their own stories. A white student, Hannah Brooks, wrote in an email, "I sat next to Marcus, I heard everything." She described how Bennett mocked Marcus in front of the class, called him slow, and threatened him with failure if he didn't shape up. She wrote she left the school shortly after. The shame had chased her out. Then came an unexpected twist that nearly broke Kendra's heart. Marcus Hayes himself, now in his mid-20s, agreed to speak. Quietly, over a phone call, he told them about nights spent shaking, about grades that dropped, about a mother's tears when perfect algebra scores vanished. Under Bennett's pen, he said he quit school. He couldn't take the humiliation anymore. He never reported it. What could he prove? Not grades, not recordings, not even witnesses who'd stay on record. But now, 15 years later, that shame, that weight, carried in Bennett's permanent file, like a weapon turned weaponless. Marcus told them he had never forgiven the school, that seeing Jayden's name and hearing the recordings felt like facing all that again, but through someone else's eyes. Kendra replayed his message across the kitchen table. The small speakerphone crackled. "I just don't want another kid to go through what I went through." She held the phone tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for speaking up." At school, the reaction was seismic. Students who once whispered now looked haunted. Teachers avoided the hall by room 208. School board members called emergency meetings. Parents who supported Bennett shrank into denial. One morning, as Kendra waited in her car at the curb outside Oak Ridge, she saw a familiar figure emerge from the front entrance. A board member she recognized from a quarterly meeting, Mrs. Clara Whitman. Prime, composed, always polite. But this morning her shoulders slumped. She glanced around. Then she opened her phone, typed quickly, hesitated, and hit send. Kendra didn't know what she sent, but she saw the fear before she saw the screen. That evening, Mrs. Whitman's daughter, a senior at Oak Ridge, burst through the Myles front door, frantic, scared. She begged to speak in private. When Kendra ushered her to the kitchen table, the girl's hands quivered. "I just got things from my mom," she said. "Emails. Internal memos. She's worried." She slid a thick envelope across. Inside were hundreds of school emails, staff communications, repeated warnings about Bennett, notes about potential liability, and caution to avoid racial complaints making it into public records. One email read, "Remove Hayes file from main records. Archive it under Personnel, 2009, so it doesn't show on background checks." Another, "No mention externally. If any lawsuit arises, we minimize exposure. 10-year sake." Kendra's breath caught. She looked at Jayden. He stood nearby, silent, his hoodie pulled over his head like a shield. The girl pressed on. "My mom doesn't want this. She's scared. She says, if this leaks, not just Bennett, but the whole district, people could lose their jobs." It was a confession, a full admission, from the inside, a betrayal of silence. The following day, the community erupted once more. Headlines like "Oak Ridge Scandal," emails revealed district knew of racism for years. Alumni expressed shock. Current parents demanded resignations. Local ministers spoke out. The town's mayor made a statement. "We will conduct a full external audit of Oak Ridge's records from the past 2 decades." In the midst of chaos, Jayden found himself pulled into another world, that of board meetings, depositions, interviews, and endless paperwork. But the unexpected twist, the girl's leak, did more than expose the institution. It exposed something darker. Fear. Fear acceptable to some, justified by reputation, tenure, legacy. It was a disease buried deep in corridors, in archive rooms, in closets marked confidential. Yet now, no more closet. Inside the Myles household, tension crackled like electricity. Late one night, As Jayden sat silently with his math textbook open but untouched, he looked up at his mother. "Mom," he said quietly, voice brittle. "Do people ever change?" Kendra didn't answer right away. She closed her eyes, remembering the man who once sat at her kitchen table, telling her that it was just a misunderstanding. The man who now faced the world, stripped of anonymity. "I don't know," she finally said. "But people can be made to face the truth." That silence between them pulsed with grief, rage, and fragile hope. But just when they thought the walls might finally start to crumble, a new threat emerged. Early the next morning, before the sun had risen, their attorney forwarded a cryptic email with the subject line, "Last chance private settlement offer." Inside was a letter from the school district's insurer backing Bennett's countersuit, offering a hush settlement, a six-figure payoff if the Myles family and their supporters signed a non-disclosure agreement, promising to drop all claims forever. Kendra looked at the amount. It was tempting. Enough to pay for college. Enough to save them from debt. Enough to silence the storm. But across the kitchen, Jayden stared at the wall. The photo of him from the science fair, the same one used on protest signs, stared back with empty eyes. He swallowed. "I can't," he said. "If I take this, they win." Silence wins. Kendra reached for his hand, her voice firm. "Then we don't take it." The weight of that decision settled like ash. In the coming hours, media outlets began asking, are they refusing money for justice? The rallying cry for independence rang loud again. And deep inside the district offices, panic took root. The auditorium where the school board planned to hold their next public hearing was suddenly booked for maintenance. Chambers where teachers once met were cleared, emails and files flagged for deletion. It felt like a retreat, but for the Myles family, it looked like fear. Outside, protesters gathered again. This time, not just for Jayden, but for every child whose story had been buried under decades of silence. And though daylight had broken many of the walls built to protect the guilty, one wall remained. The wall of power, and no amount of leaked emails, recordings, or lawsuits could yet guarantee it would fall. A school board member resigns, and leaks internal emails defending Mr. Bennett, threatening to blow open every hidden secret in Oak Ridge's past. The courtroom was colder than Jayden expected. Not in temperature, in energy. Every seat filled, but not one face warm. Cameras lined the back wall, their lenses like eyes waiting to pounce. Journalists scribbled notes. The audience sat with bated breath, not for justice but for spectacle. Some leaned forward to witness history. Others leaned back, quietly rooting for a boy to break. Jayden sat at the plaintiff's table beside his attorney, suit jacket too big for his small frame. His fingers trembled slightly, not from fear but from the weight of it all. The room didn't see a child. It saw a headline in motion. Kendra was there in the front row, clutching her son's old science fair photo between her palms like a prayer. Then the clerk called his name. "Jayden Myles, please take the stand." He rose slowly. He didn't look at the audience. He didn't glance at Mr. Bennett, who sat behind his defense attorney, lips pursed in faux patience. Jayden's legs felt like wires pulled tight with tension as he stepped up to the witness chair. He raised his hand, swore to tell the truth, then sat. "State your name for the court," the judge asked. "Jayden Myles." "And how old are you, Jayden?" 13. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge raised a hand for silence. The plaintiff's attorney stepped forward. "Jayden, I know this is difficult, but I'd like you to tell us what happened. Start from the beginning. Your first day in Mr. Bennett's class." Jayden nodded, inhaling deeply. "I transferred to Oak Ridge Middle at the start of the semester. I was placed in advanced math because I tested above grade level. On my first day, Mr. Bennett called me to the board. He gave me a problem, said if I solved it faster than him, I'd be smarter than him." He paused. The courtroom leaned in. "I solved it in 20 seconds. And what was Mr. Bennett's reaction?" Jayden looked down, then back up. "He said it was a lucky guess. After that, things changed." "Changed how?" Jayden's voice softened. "He started calling me Mr. Genius in front of the class. Not as a compliment, as a joke. He stopped calling on me. My answers were questioned. Then students started treating me different. Rumors started. Rumors. That I cheated. That I couldn't be that smart. That black kids don't belong in honors math." Gasps echoed through the room. The judge banged the gavel lightly. "Order." The attorney continued, his voice even but low. "Did Mr. Bennett ever correct the students?" "No," Jayden said firmly. "He encouraged it. Sometimes with silence. Sometimes with smirks. The attorney nodded. Let's talk about your reassignment. Why were you removed from the advanced program? They said I cheated. But they never showed proof. No one asked me for my side. Just one day, I was told I was being moved to standard math. Did you cheat? Jayden's voice was sharp. No. The silence after that answer was deafening. The attorney approached the final stretch. Jayden, when you learned about the group chat, about the recording, what did you feel? Jayden swallowed. I wasn't surprised. His answer stunned the room. I'd already heard it in his voice, in the way he looked at me, in the way the other teachers laughed with him. That tape just told everyone what I already knew. And now, sitting here today, how has this changed you? Jayden looked at the jury, then at the judge. I don't enjoy math anymore. I don't feel safe at school. I don't trust adults the way I used to. And even when people tell me I'm brave or strong, I still feel like I did something wrong. The courtroom exhaled as one. Even Mr. Bennett's attorney seemed to shift uncomfortably. The judge leaned forward. Cross-examination? Bennett's defense lawyer stood, a tall man with a sharp chin and a colder voice. He approached the stand slowly, with the posture of someone used to power. Jayden, you've been through a lot. I can't imagine how hard this has been. Jayden said nothing. But I want to ask you something simple. You say you solved that math problem in 20 seconds. Yes. Without help? Without copying? Yes. Interesting. He turned to the jury, then back. You mentioned earlier that your advanced placement came from a test score. Yes. Do you recall what your IQ is, Jayden? The question sliced through the room like broken glass. The plaintiff's attorney objected instantly. Relevance. Your Honor. IQ is not a measure of a child's humanity, nor is it required to validate mistreatment. The defense lawyer countered. If the plaintiff is claiming he was discriminated against due to his intellect being dismissed, then establishing his actual academic capacity is relevant to motive. The judge raised an eyebrow. I'll allow it, but keep it brief. The room froze. Jayden stared at the attorney. He knew what the man was doing. Not just questioning his intelligence, weaponizing it, turning his existence into a measurement. I don't know my IQ, Jayden said quietly. The lawyer nodded. Fair enough. But do you think it's fair to say you're not the only advanced student Mr. Bennett has ever taught? Jayden answered carefully. Probably not. Yet no other student has accused him of racism. Jayden straightened. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just means they were too afraid to speak. The courtroom stiffened. The lawyer smirked. So you think you saw something no one else saw? Jayden replied without blinking. No, I think I said what everyone else was scared to say. From the gallery, someone whispered, damn right. The judge called for order, but the energy had shifted. Jayden had taken their narrative and cracked it. Still, the defense lawyer wasn't done. One last question, he said, voice low. You've said a lot about how this experience made you feel, but can you tell the court truthfully that your academic ability has suffered permanently? Jayden paused. He didn't answer right away. Then finally he said, no, but my joy has. The courtroom was silent again. Kendra wiped tears from her eyes in the gallery. The judge dismissed the witness. Jayden stepped down, each footfall heavy, not with fear, but release. He didn't look at Mr. Bennett as he passed him. He didn't need to. But then, just as Jayden returned to his seat, the defense lawyer stood and said, Your Honor, the defense intends to call a surprise witness, an educator who worked with Jayden prior to Oak Ridge. The courtroom buzzed. Jayden's head turned sharply. A man entered the room through the side door, tall, white, early 40s, eyes down. Kendra's mouth fell open slightly. It was Mr. Reynolds, Jayden's former 6th grade math teacher, the one teacher Jayden trusted from his old school. The man who once told Kendra, this boy's a prodigy. The defense lawyer demands to know Jayden's IQ score, but then calls a surprise witness, Jayden's former teacher. The courtroom was so quiet it felt like the walls were holding their breath. Jayden sat beside his attorney, eyes locked forward. His palms were sweaty against his suit pants, but his face was still, the kind of stillness that doesn't come from peace. It comes from knowing there's nothing left to give. Across the room, Mr. Reynolds, Jayden's former teacher, had just finished testifying. He'd stunned everyone, not because he spoke with authority, but because he didn't waver. He recounted how Jayden used to complete assignments in half the time of other students, how he once created a math puzzle so complex that Reynolds had used it in a professional development seminar. Then he turned to the jury and said, I've taught for 19 years. Jayden is, without question, the most gifted student I've ever had. And when I heard what happened to him, I knew silence wasn't an option. Even the judge had paused before thanking him. And now, after weeks of testimony, exhibits, tears, and trauma, the case had reached its climax. Everyone in the room stood as the judge returned from chambers. She looked down over her glasses, hands folded tightly. Then she began. In the matter of Myles v. Oak Ridge School District and Donald Bennett, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff. A gasp spread like a wave. The court determines that Jayden Myles was subjected to targeted racial discrimination, academic retaliation, and emotional harm. The school district is hereby ordered to pay damages in the amount of Kendra exhaled, hands trembling. And Mr. Donald Bennett, the judge continued, you are found liable for personal misconduct. Your teaching license is hereby recommended for revocation by the State Board of Education. Jayden sat frozen. The room erupted, reporters whispering urgently into their phones, keys clicking, murmurs rising in pitch. But none of that touched him. It was like he'd gone underwater. He hadn't dreamed of this moment. He didn't think about justice like it was a finish line. Because justice hadn't healed him. It had only proven he wasn't crazy. Kendra reached for his hand. He squeezed it gently, more out of instinct than triumph. Mr. Bennett stood slowly, his face twisted in disbelief, then indignation. He turned to whisper something to his lawyer, but his voice trembled. This wasn't just a loss. It was exposure. A final unraveling of everything he'd been allowed to get away with for decades. Outside, cameras waited like sentinels. Protesters, both supporters and skeptics, lined the steps. Kendra and Jayden exited through a side door with their attorney. Journalists called after them. Jayden, how do you feel? Do you think this changes the system? Will you ever go back to Oak Ridge? But Jayden said nothing. Later, in the back of their lawyer's car, Kendra finally asked, are you okay? Jayden stared out the window for a long time before answering. I don't know. It wasn't victory he felt. It wasn't relief. It was fatigue. Like every moment of humiliation, every insult, every lie had just crashed through his body like a final tidal wave. He was 13, but he felt ancient.
The headlines the next morning read like confessions.
Racism confirmed. Jayden Myles wins landmark discrimination case. Oak Ridge teacher loses license after courtroom bombshell. Black students' courage exposes school district's dark past. At Oak Ridge, chaos reigned. Mr. Bennett was escorted from campus before noon. His classroom emptied, his desk cleared by staff who refused to make eye contact. His name was removed from the school website within hours. In the weeks that followed, sweeping changes were announced. Mandatory diversity and equity training for all faculty and administrators. A third-party audit of all disciplinary records over the past 10 years. A public forum inviting families to share grievances without fear. And then, a hiring announcement. Oak Ridge's first black math teacher, Ms. Renee Holloway. A Harvard-educated former NASA engineer who returned to her hometown to teach the very subject that once made her feel small. She stood at the podium during her introduction and said, we don't just solve for X in math, we solve for Y, and we change the how. Jayden watched the live stream of her speech from home. He didn't smile, but something inside him stirred. Still, even with change in motion, the scars lingered. He didn't return to Oak Ridge, not even for a single visit. The district offered a private apology, but it came too late and too carefully worded. Jayden's name had become a symbol. He didn't ask for that, but he carried it anyway. Therapy continued. Some days he spoke. Some days he couldn't. He returned to math, but it felt different now. Not an escape, a reclamation. Each problem he solved wasn't about proving anything. It was about healing the part of him they tried to erase. One afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail. Kendra almost threw it out, thinking it was more legal spam, until she saw the gold seal. It was from the National Youth Equity Council. Jayden had been nominated to speak at their upcoming conference in Washington, D.C. The keynote would be broadcast nationally. Jayden read the letter silently. Then again, and again. Kendra hovered. What is it? He looked up slowly. They want me to talk about what happened. Kendra's breath caught. Do you want to? Jayden stared at the envelope. I think I have to. He didn't say it with excitement. He said it with the gravity of someone who understood what speaking meant. Now, not just noise, but memory. Not just story, but change. The invitation came with a plane ticket, and hotel accommodations, and a note. We believe your voice represents what so many are still too scared to say. You're not just the future. You're the correction. Jayden sat at the kitchen table later that night, notebook in hand, writing ideas. Not a speech, not yet, just phrases, questions, moments that still echoed. He circled one word over and over. Enough. He didn't know if the world would ever be. But maybe, just maybe, if he stood up one more time, someone else would too. Jayden is invited to speak at a national youth conference. Live broadcast. The lights on stage were too bright. Jayden blinked against them, heart pounding, his palms damp where they gripped the edge of the podium. The National Youth Equity Conference was bigger than he imagined. He had practiced this speech 100 times, maybe more, in his room, on the plane, in the mirror, but nothing prepared him for the silence in that room. Thousands of faces watched him, and millions more were watching live. He glanced at the teleprompter, then back down at his notes. Then he looked up. I was 13 when they called me a disruption. No introduction, no soft start, just truth. I didn't throw a chair, I didn't start a fight, I didn't yell or curse, or break anything. I just solved a math problem. A pause, controlled, heavy, and suddenly that was too much. Somewhere in the crowd a girl whispered, "Damn," under her breath. Jayden continued, voice stronger now. I was told it was a lucky guess, then mocked, then pushed out of the classroom. I earned my way into, and when I spoke up, they tried to erase me. He didn't blink, he didn't tremble, because every time he felt the weight of that old fear creeping in, he remembered the brick through the window, the courtroom chair, the boy in the mirror who stopped recognizing himself. But he also remembered the messages, hundreds of them, from students across the country. One girl wrote, "They said I talked too proper to be black, that I must be trying to act white. Thank you for saying what I couldn't." A boy wrote, "They kicked me out of the honors program when I missed a week after my dad died. But they called it a behavioral pattern." Jayden thought about them now. Thought about how many more hadn't found the words. "I'm not here to say I won," he said into the mic. "Because you don't win trauma. You don't win when you have to prove your worth just to be allowed to sit in a classroom. You don't win when the scars follow you long after the crowd stops clapping." He took a breath. "But you survive. You speak. And maybe someone hears you and feels a little less alone." The room was silent. And then, a wave of applause. Not polite, not scripted, real, deafening. When he stepped down from the podium, his legs shook with adrenaline. Kendra was waiting in the wings, her arms wide, eyes glistening. "You did it," she whispered. Jayden hugged her tightly. "I didn't do it for me." She nodded, proud but quiet. "You did it for every kid who needed it." Later that night, back at the hotel, Jayden's phone nearly crashed from the flood of messages. Videos, comments, duets, edits of his speech going viral on every platform. A student group in Chicago posted a TikTok. Jayden said what our schools never would. A college professor tweeted, "This is not a future leader. This is a leader now." But not everything was praise. Jayden opened a message request. The top one read, "Stay in your lane. You're not a hero. You're a problem." He deleted it. Then another pinged. And another. Dozens, mixed in with love, were laced with bitterness. Racism in a new costume, smiling behind sarcasm. Threats disguised as opinions. Jayden turned his phone face down. Applause didn't erase fear. He learned that the hard way. Even after the speech, even after the trial, even after Mr. Bennett's fall from grace, Jayden still flinched in certain hallways. He still felt his chest tighten when a teacher raised their voice. Still second-guessed raising his hand, wondering if brilliance would be welcomed or punished. Redemption had a limit. It didn't rewrite memory. At his new school, things were better, but not perfect. His new math teacher, Mr. Gillis, was kind, respectful, but cautious. Too cautious. Like he was walking on eggshells, unsure whether to push Jayden or protect him. One day after class, Mr. Gillis asked, "Do you want harder material? I get the feeling this isn't challenging for you." Jayden shrugged. "It's fine." "You sure?" Jayden hesitated, then said, "I'm tired of proving things." Mr. Gillis nodded slowly. "Then, don't prove, just explore. Learning isn't a competition. It's a right." It was the first time in months Jayden left a classroom feeling like he could breathe. Still, the trauma lingered like a quiet echo. He didn't talk much about it with Kendra. They had both lived it in different ways. But one night, over dinner, he asked, Do you think I'll ever feel normal again? Kendra looked up from her plate.
I don't think you were ever normal,
She said, smiling gently. I think you were rare, and rare things carry more weight. But they shine harder too. Jayden nodded, trying to believe it. The next morning, an envelope arrived by courier. No return address. Just a heavy white card, thick and clean. He opened it. Inside, a letter on embossed paper with the MIT seal. Dear Jayden Myles, we watched your speech. We followed your case. We've read your writing. You represent the kind of mind we are honored to nurture. We'd like to invite you to join the MIT Minority Youth Scholars Program, an elite academic initiative designed to cultivate future engineers, mathematicians, and thinkers of color. Our next cohort begins this summer. We hope you'll join us. Jayden's heart skipped. He read the letter again and again. His hands trembled, not from fear but disbelief. MIT. He stood in the middle of the kitchen, stunned. Kendra walked in, setting her keys down. What's that? He turned the letter toward her without a word. She read it slowly, then once more. When her eyes met his, they were wet with something deeper than pride, relief, gratitude, awe. Baby, she whispered, they see you. The world finally sees you. Jayden sat down at the kitchen table. He didn't speak right away. Then finally he said, Can I be scared and ready at the same time? Kendra smiled. That's the only way change ever happens. Jayden gets an invitation to join a gifted program run by MIT. MIT had always felt like another universe to Jayden. A place reserved for people whose brilliance didn't need defending, whose curiosity was celebrated, instead of interrogated. But now, walking across the infinite corridor as a sophomore, backpack slung loosely over one shoulder, he felt something quieter, not triumph, not vindication, belonging. The years since Oak Ridge had changed him in ways he didn't fully understand until he arrived here. He was older now, 19, but it was more than age. It was steadiness, a kind of gravity he carried that others sensed when he spoke in class, when he solved a problem, when he pushed back during discussion with a clarity that came from living through something sharper than academic. He studied cognitive science, the field of mind's identities, decisions, biases. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd once been reduced to a stereotype by a teacher who never bothered to see his mind at all. Now he was devoting his life to understanding how minds shaped the world, and how the world shaped them back. On a cold October morning, he slipped into his favorite lecture hall, a wide room with glass walls overlooking the Charles River. Students sat scattered in clusters, laptops open, coffee cups steaming. Professor Wallace, a gentle-voiced researcher who had once worked at Stanford, started class by writing a question on the board. What moment in your life changed how you understand intelligence? Students whispered. Some chuckled. A few rolled their eyes. Jayden sat still. He knew his answer immediately. Professor Wallace turned. Who wants to share before we begin? A few hands rose. Wallace nodded to a girl in the second row. My AP biology teacher told me I'd never do science in college, she said. I got into MIT because of that moment. Another student said, my older brother used to race me in puzzles. Losing made me want to win. Laughter followed. Then Wallace's eyes landed on Jayden. Jayden? You look like you already know. Jayden took a breath. He didn't normally speak about his past in detail. Here he didn't have to. People respected him. No one questioned how he got here. No one implied he cheated his way in. But something in the room felt ready, like his voice would add more than it would reopen. So he spoke. The moment wasn't a good one, he began quietly. It wasn't when someone encouraged me. It was when someone tried to destroy me, because they couldn't accept that I was smart. The room shifted. Heads turned. Jayden continued. I was 13. My math teacher gave me a problem he thought I'd fail. I solved it in 20 seconds. Instead of being proud, he mocked me. Then he spread lies, called me a cheater. My school took his side. The whole community split. I ended up in court. A thick silence fell over the hall. Professor Wallace didn't interrupt. Jayden stared down at his hands. People tried to make my intelligence something ugly, something suspicious, something threatening. He paused, and for a long time I believed them. A few students stared in stunned disbelief. Others nodded slowly, absorbing each word like it was a lecture in itself. But the moment that really changed me wasn't the math challenge. It wasn't the racism. It wasn't the trial. He exhaled. It was my mother. His voice softened. She fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. She told me that brilliance is never the problem, only the fear people have of it. He looked up. She made me believe I didn't have to shrink. Not for anyone. The room was utterly silent. Then Professor Wallace nodded once, deeply moved. Thank you, she said. That may be the most important answer I've heard in 20 years. Class continued, but Jayden stayed quiet the rest of the hour, letting the memories settle like dust in beams of sunlight. Afterwards, a few students approached him. A girl with curly hair said softly, "My teacher said people like me weren't meant for advanced classes. Hearing you, it makes me feel less alone." Another student added, "Man, I can't believe you went through that and still made it here." Jayden nodded, offering small smiles. He didn't tell them that even now, even surrounded by acceptance, there were moments he still looked over his shoulder. Trauma didn't evaporate in prestigious lecture halls, but it didn't own him anymore. Later that afternoon, he found himself in the campus cafe, laptop open, drafting a paper on cognitive bias. The hum of conversation drifted around him. Laughter whispered study sessions. The clinking of ceramic cups. It was ordinary in a way life had never been, when he was younger. Then his email pinged. He glanced at the sender, Office of Government Partnerships. At first he assumed it was a scholarship reminder, or an internship fair announcement. But when he clicked it open, the words stunned him. Subject: Invitation to Federal Internship Program. Dear Mr. Myles, your work in advocacy and educational equity have come to the attention of the White House Office of Policy Development. We are impressed by your resilience, your clarity, and your contributions to public discourse on academic discrimination. We would like to invite you to participate in the White House Summer Policy Internship, focusing specifically on K-12 educational equity reform. Should you accept, you will work alongside national leaders, shaping the future of American education. We hope you consider this opportunity. Sincerely, Dr. Elaine Rowe, Director, Federal Educational Equity Task Force. Jayden read the email twice. Then again, his coffee sat unattended. The noise in the cafe faded until it was just a distant, blurry hum. All he could hear was his own heartbeat, steady, strong, shocked. A White House internship. Educational equity. Him. He leaned back, eyes unfocused, the weight of the moment landing in layers. He wasn't just being seen, he was being invited into the heart of the very system that once failed him. He thought of everything that had led him here. The problem he solved in 20 seconds. The humiliation that followed. The slurs. The memes. The courtroom chair. The brick through the window. The speech on the national stage. The MIT acceptance letter. And now, this, he whispered to himself, almost in disbelief. Smarter than you ever knew, not because of math, but because he had survived something that should have broken him. He closed the laptop slowly, hands steady now. He knew exactly what he had to do. But before he could rise from his seat, his phone buzzed with a message from his mother. She'd texted a photo, a framed newspaper article sitting on their living room shelf back home. The headline read, "Local boy triumphs, future leader emerges from injustice." Underneath the photo she wrote, "No matter how far you go, I'm right behind you. Love, Mom." Jayden smiled. For real this time. He stood, slung his backpack over his shoulder, and headed down the corridor toward his dorm, ready to change the world that once tried to shrink him. Jayden is offered a White House internship, focused on educational equity. No child should ever have to fight to prove their worth. Not in a classroom. Not in a courtroom. Not anywhere. Jayden's story isn't just his. It's a mirror held up to a broken system. Type yes if you believe brilliance should never be silenced. Subscribe if this broke your heart.